So the question, for most questions, if you say what is a tiger, you can assume that tigers exist, and you can find ways of describing it, classifying it. It's a big cat, it's got yellow and black stripes, etc., etc. But what about the question, what is being? Is this a legitimate question? Well, first of all, it assumes that there's something called being, and secondly, it assumes that being can be described and defined in the way that a tiger can be. But in actual fact, as we've said, we can't make much sense of there being something called being over and above the sum total of everything that exists. There's always being. But is there something with a capital B called being that exists over and above those? And secondly, to the extent that you can make sense of that, it's not something that you can say what it is, because there's nothing else that you can describe it in terms of. There's no other things you can classify it in, and so on. So the only thing perhaps you might say, well, if you're thinking about being as an abstract concept, you could oppose it to nothingness. Being is not nothingness. So perhaps that's about the only sort of thing we can really say about being with a capital B, that it's not nothing. And that's not a very productive line of inquiry. It doesn't get us very far. So what I'm arguing is that the whole idea of these questions like what is being are illegitimate questions. They're questions that don't have a sensible answer. P.F. Strawson, the English philosopher, summed up Heidegger's views in the New York Review of Books in this way. He said that insofar as the question of being is a genuine inquiry, it's precisely an inquiry to the concepts that we ourselves are part of. It's an inquiry into whether we exist or not, what things exist for us, and so on. And he says if we refuse to construe ontology, examination of being, in that way, in a way of looking at all the things that exist, but instead remain fixed and fascinated before the perfectly general question, what is being itself, then we can expect none but formal or trivial answers. Being is not nothing, it's trivial answers. However pretentious we may be tempted to make them sound. And he says Heidegger, must be said, became fixed and fascinated in this way. So Heidegger and a number of other philosophers, and after them theologians, got sucked in by this idea of being with a capital B. It's been an important concept. Tillich was one of them. Paul Tillich, God is the ground of our being, and so on. There are lots of examples of that. Okay, so Heidegger has destroyed, he thinks, ontotheology. He's destroyed the old way of thinking. And a lot of theologians go along with him. He's probably the philosopher that's most influential in theological circles in the late 20th century, early 21st century, because it gets them out of the clutches of reason, of logic, of all the things that the Enlightenment advanced to try and get some sort of sense in the area of religion. So the Enlightenment has hit a body blow to the religion, but it's maybe down, but it's not out. It's rising up with post-ontological theology that does not assume the basics of logic and reason, but rather goes straight to this idea of what is being. So instead of the old type, the God of the philosophers, the old ontological God, the God that is the first mover, is the first cause, etc., etc. The new theology sees religion and God in a totally different way. First of all, it sees religion, some people see religion as just an experience. And you can't really argue with experience. I experience the world in a religious way, I say. Whatever Dawkins and Hitchens say, that's irrelevant. This is the way I experience the world. And all their arguments and so on about the existence of God, the God of the philosophers, are all irrelevant, because this is, for me, is an experience, the way I experience the world. Some people see religion as just a series of practices. Prayer, meditation, that sort of thing. We'll go into these in a bit more detail later. Some of the new theologians say that religion is just a form of symbolism. And so Dawkins is totally irrelevant to them. Karen Armstrong has advanced the theory that religion is a form of what she calls mythos, which is a Greek word for mythology, as opposed to logos. And various theologians have said, well, religion is just an attitude to life, it's a stance I take. And again, what Dawkins says about God is totally irrelevant. This is a stance I'm taking towards the world, which is a religious stance, and all these arguments about whether God exists or not are totally irrelevant, these people say. So let's look a bit more detail at these various points. This is a quote from Keith Ward, who's an Anglican minister who gave the Faraday lecture in England in 2006. Belief in God is not a dispassionate hypothesis which tries to explain why things are as they are by providing an objective, publicly demonstrable, theoretical explanation, as Dawkins says they do. Belief in God is more like an immediate reactive attitude to things we encounter and experience, more like belief that we and other persons exist. But it generalises the notion of personal agency to cover the whole experience of the universe. Treating the universe, or at least the universe as known by us, as the body or physical expression of an underlying personal agent, known in and through the universe. So what he's saying is that we all experience the universe as being active in some way. We talk to our car when it won't start. We call things by personal pronouns. It's a natural human proclivity to actually deal in our everyday life with the things we encounter, almost as though they are persons. And what Ward is saying is that what religion does is generalise this basic experience that we have to say, well, the whole of the universe is like this, and we call it God. You can't argue with experience. You can't say, oh, we didn't have that experience. You can't say, oh, well, I've got proof here that God doesn't exist. So what? Doesn't matter. Those of you who were at the Atheist conference and heard me speaking there may remember the famous dumbbell incident, which I recounted, which was where I was doing these dumbbell exercises every morning at that stage of my life. And there was one exercise where you get down the bed and you just do one dumbbell with that hand, and then you get the other one out and do the same with the other hand. And I did it with one dumbbell, and then I turned around to do it with the other, and I said, oh, I better change dumbbells, I thought to myself, because this dumbbell will get upset if I don't use it, if I don't use the dumbbell. And I thought, hang on. But it's quite amazing. Every time I use those dumbbells, I find it really, really difficult not to use one dumbbell for one hand and one for the other, even though they're totally inanimate objects and so on. It's just something that about the way we view the world, that we do tend to treat inanimate objects and animate but insensate objects as though they were feelings and so on. So this has led me to develop what I call the dumbbell proof of God's existence, which is a version of Keith Ward's argument. So Keith Ward's argument is that this is the way we see the world and therefore God exists. So this is my dumbbell proof of God's existence. Robbo talks to his dumbbells, therefore God exists. Okay, religion is a set of practices. Religion by the new theologians, the post-ontological theologians, is seen as a way of life, a set of practices and rituals. Worshipping, praying, meditating, chanting, singing, dancing, reading, contemplating, etc., through which people express their relationship to God and their attitude to life. So it's just a series of things people do. And of course, logical arguments have got no purchase there. Logical arguments don't affect things people do. This is the way we live. We pray to God, we sing chants, we do various rituals and so on. And we can't argue against the practice. Dawkins, again, seems being irrelevant. Dawkins can say what he likes about the ontological proof or the teleological proof. This is just my practice, this is just what I do. Then we got religion as symbolism. Quote from John Shelby Spong, who's a notorious Episcopalian bishop in Newark, I think, in New York. And these are his 4 basic principles. Love is God. Yes, God is love. He says love is God. God is in each individual. God is a symbol of that which is immortal, invisible, and timeless. And God is being. He's been reading this Heidegger. God is being, the reality underlying everything that is. And it's the one in red there that I want to have a look at. God is a symbol of that which is immortal, invisible, and timeless. Now this is problematic because a symbol must be a symbol of something. To say God is a symbol of whatever it is immortal, invisible, and timeless, begs the question that something immortal, invisible, and timeless exists for God to be a symbol of. And quite obviously, that doesn't really get us anywhere because it just shifts the problems that we have with God to this other thing, whatever it is that God is a symbol of, this immortal, invisible, timeless something. So the whole idea of religion as a symbol doesn't really work, or as a metaphor it's sometimes expressed too. And symbols have to be symbols for something, metaphors for something. And so the something that they're symbolising, metaphorical, they're referring to, are still open to investigation and still open to question.